Proportionately, there are a lot more concerns for the U.S. on the southern border. There's a lot of security, narco trafficking, movement of people issues. Canada, on a percentage basis, is not as important as Mexico is. But at the same time, the opportunities for exploitation of the access that Canada has to the United States are huge. And even though Canadians complain that they don't have the same access to the U.S. that they used to, going across the border with just a wave, what is concerning is that other people, terrorists, folks who mean the U.S. harm, could use the preferential access that Canada has to come into the U.S., to do harm in the U.S., and be involved in various illegal activities.
Well, I think when we're talking about the region of the Akwesasne region between Canada and the United States, the provinces of Quebec and Ontario and New York State, that region has such a jurisdictional complexity. It really does have the potential to be the route for all sorts of illicit activity across that very complicated border. Well, there are actually, there is smuggling and there is concern for trafficking of not only what some might call contraband cigarettes, but also illicit drug trafficking, and anywhere you can move drugs and things like that, you can certainly move money and people and weapons. And we are concerned about all the different activities up there. There are certainly confirmed reports of a number of different outlaw agencies and organizations that are operating up in that region.
Well, culture, there's history. For us, it's the refuge for the Mohawks. Akwesasne has always been part of the territory of the Mohawks, but originally our homeland was back in the closer to the Albany, New York area, Albany, Schenectady, the Mohawk Valley, and as history goes, we had to move from there. And one of the refuge areas was Akwesasne. So a lot of the people from the Mohawk Valley went to Akwesasne, and that's where we picked up. So it's always been, within our context, part of Mohawk land. It's a very defined territory. It's the last place, I think, where we can go, where we can say, we've always had this territory since time immemorial. Since being there, we've become river people. It's been a couple of 100 years now. We've lived off the river. For us, the St. Lawrence River was very much a resource basin, full of resources that we could live off of, which we didn't mind sharing. When the Loyalists came up after the Revolutionary War, the Americans came in, we didn't mind sharing it, the resources of the river basin. However, we also had to recognize that we were two distinct peoples, possibly even three at one point. So we had to develop in Canada, we had to develop in the United States. But we could all coexist and feed off of the resource base. And to us, we likened it very much to a common bowl that we could all eat from. And there is a notion in our mind of something called a bowl with one spoon. We all feed from the same bowl with one spoon. And we can do that so long as we understand, we have understandings of how we're going to coexist. I don't think so. I think it's getting better, and better in the sense that they become aware of the necessity to do so. And I just want to roll back. Back after 9/11, there was a lot of fear that went across both nations, across North America. It was a calamity, it was a catastrophe. And people were afraid. It was a very emotional time. This carried on for years later. They weren't thinking about Akwesasne. That wasn't the consideration. The consideration was a security consideration. How do we secure both countries? And so security kind of was the trump card. And I think over time, when we're looking at the corridor, the St. Lawrence River corridor, it became apparent that if we're going to attack the mission, or if we're going to achieve the mission successfully, we're going to have to take more consideration on the issues from Akwesasne, on the tribal side, in order to be successful. And I think that's an awareness that slowly permeated upwards into the bureaucracies. And now I think there's a consciousness of it. So I think there's been a lot of advancements, good advancement in that area. But the question now is that now that we're aware of it, and now that we have a feeling that there's a spirit of collaboration and cooperation, how do we translate that into action, into something that is productive and that will serve the interest of all parties?
There's definitely unevenness. The Canadian government is reluctant to take the issue on because it has the implications with the First Nations community. They don't want to inflame issues there. Also, because there haven't been really major criminal violations there. Again, because tobacco is considered to be a relatively victimless crime, it's socially acceptable, it's not something that is being taken as seriously as it should be. The U.S. is taking it relatively more seriously in terms of its focus on border enforcement task forces, the land rider and ship rider programs. They're taking a fairly serious view of it, but it's such a complicated issue with Aboriginal governments, with a provincial, state, federal. It's tough unless there's sufficient resources and attention being paid to it. Otherwise, people can just, fob it off as somebody else's problem.
Well, as a person who used to be involved in this, I felt like we never got the prioritization that we needed, and anybody who's in that region probably doesn't feel it's getting that priority. But I think it's extremely important, and I think it's something that hopefully it doesn't take some extremely unfortunate occurrence or incident to bring attention to this, and hopefully people can recognize the connections and the possibilities and the potential of illicit activity and how those connections can be made, so that we can address it and get all the stakeholders together before there's an additional clarion call for activity.
Well, I hope that is not that something bad has to happen in order to get the attention. What I think is a better way forward would be to address it more seriously within the context of the Beyond the Border Agreement, which is an agreement that the U.S. and Canada have been involved in over the last 2 years that involves improving our security, improving our shared movement of people, cargo, etc., and that this should be addressed head-on as one of those issues. And the U.S. should probably make it clear to Canada that it's not willing to accept Canada as a full partner in war on terrorism, in security, unless Canada gets serious about what is effectively a hole in the border.